Sure, you've heard of handlers in an MK Ultra or Monarch programming sense, but have you ever wondered how they spot their targets? Today I want to get into some common day signs that we may unconsciously be putting off to attract handlers, narcissists, and other manipulative people in our life. The important thing to remember is that despite where you come from, despite your bloodline, ancestral line, family lineage, IQ, the fact that you have family in military or involved with Masons, or if you were part of an early childhood gifted program, handlers cannot take advantage of you if you don't allow them to, and if you don't consent. Oftentimes, we give these types of people consent without even realizing it, and that's what I want to talk about today. So if somebody is what we consider a handler, whether that is in a Monarch programming sense, like they work for an intelligence agency, they work for some kind of religious organization and they're tracking people based on ancestral lines or blood types, or if this is just your everyday handler, narcissist, cult leader who's trying to further their own agenda. The one thing all of these people seem to have in common is that they are all manipulative. And to be manipulative, you have to be perceptive on some level. So you have to be good at paying attention to patterns, to details, to energy. So like everything in the world, intuition can be a blessing and a curse, or sensitivity, not intuition, psychic sensitivity. Because the more sensitive we are, when we're aware of that, that's when we can really tap into the blessing of our psychic sensitivities and intuition. But if we're running unconscious programs and we're really not aware of it, and we're operating out of trauma conditioning, then we can absolutely fall into the dark sides of being a dark empath, sometimes even a narcissist ourselves. But today I want to focus more on the other person and how we become a target to those types of people. So as I was saying, most of these people are well versed in psychology, in noticing patterns, or something called NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, which means that they would be good at mirroring somebody and asking the right questions to get a feel for that person's energy, personality, and triggers. And the craziest thing about all of this is that somebody can tell so much about you even in the first 30 seconds of meeting you. And this is when things like body language really matter. So for example, if you've been through a lot of trauma, you're typically not going to stand up tall or proud. You may have a hunched posture. You may be quiet. You may have a hard time looking somebody in the eye. You may be unsure about the things that you say. You might feel like a wallflower or somebody who kind of blends into the background. Maybe you don't want to be seen. You only want to be seen by the right person and understood by the right person. Maybe because relating is hard for you, you choose to mask those feelings and numb yourself, or as I say, dumb yourself down by choosing to drink alcohol or engage in the use of substances, which kind of flatline you in a way, and in a lot of ways is self-medicating from trauma that we've experienced. And it's something I can only speak for myself, but before I had really processed all my trauma, I did lean on alcohol, for example, to make myself feel more normal and to fit in more with the everyday people. But all of the things that I mentioned within the first 30 seconds can paint a picture of you, or shall I say a profile of you. And this is what handlers are often looking for. So when it comes to body language or a slumped posture or somebody who can't look somebody in the eye, this is often called fawning type behavior. So fawning is when we freeze, when we dissociate, or when we act to appease the abuser. So we may fall into behaviors like complimenting them or being overly apologetic or trying to help them and make them feel comfortable, because this becomes something that we, as victims of early childhood trauma, become used to. So until we unravel our own trauma and trauma conditioning, we often don't know that we're doing this. And that's why I stress self-awareness and share so many tools for processing trauma on my channel, because if we're not aware of our patterns, the people who are out there to abuse or capitalize on them are aware of it. And I can only speak for myself again, but in my experience, when I was attracting people like this during my whole Hollywood rendezvous of trying to break into the entertainment industry, I fit the bill for all of those things. Except at the time, I was actually sober. And I was open about my sobriety and the fact that I used to have issues with drinking. And that could be another red flag when you're an open book and you're not cognizant of having boundaries, or you're too trusting of people around you, or you're simply not paying enough attention. Because a really manipulative person might even look at your history as somebody who has suffered from addiction before, and they may try to get you to use with them, which is what happened for me. And one of the ways they can subtly do that is A, put it in your face all the time, B, invite you multiple times to do it with them, even though you have been very clear about your sobriety, but they're trying to normalize their addictive behaviors and minimize how dangerous they might be for you. Somebody who respects you and who has your best interest in mind is not going to be like, oh, Alex, one drink won't kill you. Oh, Alex, THC is actually good for you. It helps you sleep, even though you had a really big problem with it. You were maybe overreacting. It's actually really healthy. The monks used it. So they're going to come up with a bunch of different excuses to try to get you to let down your guard. But ultimately, what they're trying to do is capitalize, or that's not the word I'm thinking of, but I can't think of the other word for capitalize. But they're trying to essentially, for lack of better words, capitalize on your weakness, where you're vulnerable. And that's the biggest one that I can think of that is the easiest for somebody to manipulate, is somebody who has a substance abuse, because your addiction takes care of everything that they need it to. Addictions are often brought on by early childhood trauma and conditioning, and addictions are often a way that we as individuals mask that trauma. So somebody who has an addiction is going to be basically like a walking red flag to somebody who's trying to profile their next victim, because they're going to say, okay, this person doesn't have too much high regard for themselves because they're abusing everything that they put in their body, so they don't care how unhealthy their habits are. They don't care. They have no boundaries when it comes to accepting a drink from a total stranger. They will take a joint from anybody. They will have a beer with anybody who's around them. So do you see how this can be extremely dangerous in the wrong crowd? It's one thing if you're with close friends that you know, but if you're at a bar, if you're in a public space, and for the love of God, if you're in the entertainment industry and you're around people that you don't know, it's extremely dangerous to be a person who doesn't have boundaries about what you consume. And this can absolutely make you a target for these types of people. So that's one way. But let's say you don't drink and that doesn't apply to you. Well, there's other ways they can infiltrate your life. Well, they can start testing your boundaries. And if you're not really strong in your boundaries and you can't, or you don't notice this type of behavior early on, and if you've already had a lot of experience with manipulative people in the past, for the most part, somebody testing your boundaries might be normal for you. So it's hard to catch it in the beginning. But manipulative people, narcissists and groomers and handlers love to use that type of, those type of tactics. I actually remember this one guy I dated a handful of years ago, the domestic violence guy. He used to tell me, huge red flag right here, that in therapy, he discussed how he likes to push people's boundaries with his therapist. So in a way, he was already telling on himself. But since I had unprocessed trauma, I was not able to look past my own needs at the time, which were for male validation and safety, which I was looking for in the wrong places. And I just wanted somebody to be by my side so I wouldn't have to be alone. So I missed those red flags, even though he literally told me exactly what he was doing. He liked to push people's boundaries. This can also be a trait that people who are bipolar have. So not everybody who's bipolar will be like that. And this is by no means like hating on people that have bipolar, but I am just sharing that this can be something that bipolar people kind of suffer with if they're if they're in kind of like the negative space that bipolar can take people into. So they're looking for excitement in their lives, and they often find it through messing with somebody else's boundaries. So look out for those types of people who are pushing your boundaries early on. And again, the substance abuse or the alcohol was a great example where you tell somebody, I don't like alcohol. I don't drink, it's not good for me. And then they subtly try to test your boundaries by saying, hey, I bought you a bottle of wine. Oh, I forgot you don't drink. Well, should I just take it back? I spent so much money on it. And then they make you feel guilty about it. So let's wait for this loud jet to pass. And enjoy the beautiful scenery of the desert while we're waiting for that to pass. Soak all this in. Thank you for your feedback on my desert videos. I love being out here. Okay, so let's get back into testing boundaries. That's one way to test boundaries. You can also test boundaries in an intimate way. For example, telling somebody you're not into certain acts of intimacy, and they either do it despite you telling them no, or they keep pushing you to do something that you've clearly told them you're not comfortable with. So that one's mostly going to be for people you're in a relationship with or have an intimate relationship with, but that's a huge, huge one where people can exploit you in a very subtle way without you realizing it. And once they start pushing and testing those boundaries, if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to ask for a glass of milk, and then he's going to ask for the key to the house and then the car and all the other things that the mouse is going to ask for after you give them access to one little thing. So if you're not extremely strong and set and firm in your boundaries in the beginning, there's no limits for these people. They'll just keep exploiting you. But the blessing of coming in contact with these people is that oftentimes after we do, sometimes they're the catalyst to us realizing that we have to have better boundaries. So this is, why I always say nothing is wasted in God's economy. Oftentimes we're sent these types of situations and scenarios so that they can teach us to have better boundaries. And how do we know that the first handler or narcissist that we come across isn't protecting us from somebody even worse than them down the line? So if you can spot these behaviors earlier, the better, because there's some people who stay in relationships with these people for years and for decades because they haven't done any inner work when it comes to their own trauma deconditioning, and they're not very understanding of their own patterns. And they fall into the trap that a lot of people do. We fall into this trap of always worrying about what our partner is doing and their behaviors rather than looking at why we attract those people in the first place. So we've covered, they may pressure you to use substances and alcohol, which will lower your guard and make you easier to control. We've discussed how they push your boundaries. we've discussed how they look at your body language and they can tell if you're not carrying yourself with your shoulders back in a proud way, and if you're not able to look someone in the eye confidently, and if you over apologize or make excuses for other people's bad behavior, then you're like a shiny red flag to these people, and it excites them because they know that you're going to be an easy target for them to manipulate. So what else? This is, tone of voice too. That's a big one that I wanted to talk about. Your relationship and trauma history. Are you a person that is an open book about sharing about your past relationship experiences? Watch what you share online and who you confide in, because somebody who's well-versed in profiling or in LP can spot somebody who's had a lot of trauma bond type relationships in the past, and they can use those patterns against you. So they can spot somebody like, oh, Alex is clearly not healed. I can find a honeypot for her, and I can encourage her to go talk to this guy who's absolutely going to destroy her. So that's more of an like entertainment type industry. If you've ever come across somebody who's a mentor or they're posing as your friend, but they're trying to manage your career in some way or get you to join in their cult or some kind of religious program. Often they use triangulation. So they may be like the main handler, but sometimes handlers, in order to throw you off their game, can meddle with your love life and try to encourage you to date people who are clearly bad for you. So it's important that, again, you have strong boundaries in who you date, and you know who you are and what you tolerate in relationships. So you're not so suggestible that you're like, oh yeah, this guy has a good idea and a good point about this person I should date. And you basically, like, we have to become really good gatekeepers of who we allow in our lives, and also really good at understanding human behavior and human psychology ourselves. So it's one thing if you don't know anything about human psychology and you're just, it's just not something you've been interested in, something that you haven't been experienced in. But the handler or the narcissist or the groomer in your life is very good at spotting patterns in people. So you're a vibrational match to them at that time because they're spotting your weaknesses. And then through the process of them trying to manipulate you or handle you or whatever, all of a sudden you start to learn about your own patterns of behavior through them, or you start to see what they're doing and realize, like, this is not healthy, this is not okay. So as a result of that experience, you learn something from it. And hopefully you don't do what I mentioned in one of my last videos about relationship programming, where instead of sit with what we've learned from a situation, we try to mask that pain and we go out and seek another experience to kind of numb ourselves from dealing with the last one. That can be a huge problem when we're the ones who are not looking at our own patterns of behavior, and then we just keep jumping to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Because like I said, when you're always in, well, it's what we call a transitional period. And this is a huge red flag and a huge target, puts a target on your back for these types of people, because if they notice that you're always jumping around, you're always in a transitional phase, you're always right in between jobs or in between relationships, then it makes it really easy for them to become the pattern that they see that you're attracted to. So they either become that pattern and they become the guy that you're always attracted to in the next relationship, or they become somebody, essentially they become what you need. So if you're a good example of this, another way it can play out. So like, let's say somebody's trying to manipulate you or handle you or groom you, and maybe they're not your physical type, but they're still a manipulative person who's trying to get something from you. So they may recognize that they're not your type, so they have no chance in hell with you. But they know that because you're so run down from your relationship patterns and the trauma bonds that you've been in, man, there's chemtrails everywhere out here. I just like, and jets. But when I was starting my walk earlier, there's like so many chemtrails. What is going on with this? Driving me nuts. Anyway. Oh my God, can you believe it? Okay, so back to talking about, the pattern. So if they know that they don't have a chance with you, they might be able to see the patterns that you've had with men or women or whoever you date, and then they can say, well, clearly they need a safe space, or they need a friend, or they need somebody to co-sign their narrative about their last ex. So a great example is like you get out of a relationship with a toxic boyfriend and you're just in shock by it and you're trying to vent to people. You want to share your story with people. So rather than playing the guy who's going to come in and be your next boyfriend, or the girl who's going to come in and be the next boyfriend, maybe they decide to pose as the friend who's going to say, yeah, that person totally did you wrong. We should totally get back at them. I can't believe they did that to you. And then they start to support you through that breakup. But their support is calculated. There is an end game with it. They're not just being supportive to be supportive. They're being supportive because they want something from you, whether that is your time, your energy, your attention, your money, your validation, whatever. So let's see, I think that's the gist of, what makes you a target to these people. And again, the solution for me is always the same. It's just self-awareness, self-awareness, self-awareness. Because the common denominator here is that these people are well-versed in psychology, NLP, grooming tactics, and a lot of them may be neurodivergent themselves. For example, in a personal experience that I had, somebody always said they had Asperger's and they were really good at spotting patterns. And I didn't think anything of it at the time, but when I look back at all the manipulative behaviors that they had throughout the course of our friendship, it's very clear and obvious that they were very good at spotting my personal patterns and played me like a fiddle, essentially. So the good news is, though, when you get really good at spotting this behavior and when you start to be the own healer for yourself, then you're no longer attractive to these people because they can't manipulate you anymore. And what happened for me is that the second I started to see my own patterns, like patterns of behavior in these types of people, it took a lot of experiences with these types, like time and time and time again. Like, I don't even know how many I met that year. But I met a whole group of people that kind of had that same energy and testing of the boundaries and secretive behavior, etc. So over time, I was able to realize, I'm starting to notice these patterns, but more importantly, why do these people keep getting through to me? Like, what am I doing? And it's like, I don't have strong boundaries. I'm not being cognizant about what I'm putting in my body because I'm just like, oh, cool, I'm here for the party, guys. I'm not being a responsible adult by looking at what I'm consuming. So my inhibitions are lowered. So that's a big thing. Just can't be a good gatekeeper if you're not 100% conscious. And then I had to look at, I'm walking around telling my trauma story to all these people. And I'm not, I haven't processed it. Instead of sitting alone and processing it and maybe taking some time to myself, instead I'm still out there on the social scene, probably having a drink with friends, venting about our ex-boyfriend. So whoever's sitting there listening is gonna hear all about the patterns. So like I said, they're gonna either come in and try to be the opposite of what you don't want, or the one you're talking smack about, or they're going to be the friend that you need, or the friend that you need to go against that partner with you. So triangulation. But in this case, rather than ganging up on you, they're acting like they're on your side and you guys are pitted against the third party. So triangulation can look like that, or it can look like they've got somebody on their side and those two people are pitted against you. So when two are against one, it's more likely for the one that's left out to fold, so they're not left out of something. So getting really good at spotting your patterns. And what else? Noticing when somebody's testing your boundaries, but more importantly, understanding what your own boundaries are. So this is one that I used to not really think about much because, like I said, my old mentality for a lot of things in life was just like, well, let's just go have fun. Whatever happens, happens. Like, you know, we're writing the future as we're writing history as we go or whatever. So I wasn't really strong in who I was, and I just really would leave things up to chance way too much. And now I know better because I had all those situations that made me more cautious and cognizant about who I'm sharing my time and energy with. So now I know I have very strong boundaries about who I even allow to be friends with me. So, I mean, I can tell you what some of them look like today, just based on my past. I'm not going to date somebody who drinks or smokes because I don't smoke or drink. And I know how easy it was to sway me in the past. So I love myself more than I love anybody else because I can't function if I don't put on my oxygen mask first. So I have to have a hard boundary. Like, I can't date somebody who is also not sober. Another thing might be that if you've been in a religious cult before or some kind of organization and there's like a lot of signs and sigils that remind you of these people, maybe if you see those signs and sigils on somebody's profile, you decide that that's a boundary for you right there. You don't want to date somebody who listens to rock or satanic death cult music. That's just not your thing. So rather than feeling guilty about it because you're not being open and loving to anyone, instead you're going to say, well, I have these boundaries to keep me safe. And if it is what it is, if somebody doesn't, if somebody can't pay to enter, so to speak, then they don't get to enter. You don't get to come to my party for free if you're not going to pay like everybody else did. So that is another example of how we can set boundaries and know ourselves, but also boundaries for our own behaviors. So for example, even if you're not going to be like a hardcore sober person and you still want to, partake in the occasional drink, a boundary for you might be, I'm not going to do shots tonight, or I'm not going to do a drink on a date. We're going to have our first 3 dates be sober so I can make a conscious decision about whether or not I trust you. So that, again, was like a big one that I had to learn, because my old boundaries were like trying to make decisions on who you would allow to enter your life when you were under the influence. So you're not thinking clearly, and you're just like, in a lot of ways, the altered states of consciousness are making everything seem fun, and you're just not able to spot the bad behaviors early on. So that became a huge boundary for me, not only for myself, like I'm not going to drink on a date, and I'm also not going to drink on a date, and I also don't want a partner that drinks because I know down the line that would potentially cause issues for me. So it's just easier to draw that line in the sand, because like I said, the second you start to make exceptions for one person, that's when people can continue to break those boundaries. And if you're not strong in your boundaries, then where do you draw the line between saying yes or no? So that's why oftentimes it's better to be black and white, because you save yourself a lot of pain and a lot of problems down the line if you can just know up front, like, this is not me, this is not what I stand for, like, nope, done, sorry. And if you're not used to setting boundaries, if you've kind of been this empathic, open person for a long time, it can feel really uncomfortable at first to set those boundaries. But this is something that the more you practice, the better at it you'll get. So like I said, for myself, sometimes it takes a handful of narcissists to enter in your life back to back before you finally realize oh, wow, okay, I'm the common denominator. They're obviously getting in somehow. What am I doing? Why am I a target to these people? Okay, I see. And that's why I have tools like my fear inventory and belief exploration worksheet with the 21-day habits tracker. And that's why they're listed as pay what you can, so you can get them for free if you can't afford to pay them. So these are so important in helping us uncover the patterns in our life. Like if you can just look at yourself, you don't need to journal about it or talk to somebody about it, all the power to you, that's great. But for me, I had to write it down and see it on a piece of paper. My fear inventory list is, I think it's like 20 pages. So there's room for you to write down 20 names, relationships from your past, relationships from your present or recent past. There's room for you to write down those names and start to look at the dynamics in every one of those relationships. And the more names you do, the more patterns you will see. And then because the inventory list is a self-appraisal or self-inventory, we're not necessarily looking at like how they wronged us. We're looking at why we allowed it to happen, or like what didn't we spot, what made us a target, what was my fear that made me stay in this relationship and not walk away sooner? Was it my finances that was preventing me from leaving? Was it my beliefs about love and loneliness? Was it my living situation? Like what made me a vulnerable target? So if we write it down, and we write a lot of them down, we'll often start to see the pattern loud and clear. So then once we see the pattern, we can start to say, okay, well, how can I make changes? And oftentimes those changes aren't going to involve other people. It's not going to be the change like, I just need to find a better partner, because that's a lie that we tell ourselves too. And that's deflection and projection and not taking accountability for what we're doing. So not to say that you can't be a better gatekeeper for the next person, but if we're trying to find a partner immediately after breaking up with one, before we do the inner work to become a better match for the right person, we're not learning anything, and we're going to continue to keep attracting those same people, and we'll probably have a short period of honeymoon phase. But if we don't fix the underlying belief system that keeps them in our lives, then eventually we're going to experience the same dynamics that we experienced with the last narcissist or handler or groomer. So it's important to understand the patterns, ask how we can fix them. So maybe if money is my issue, maybe before I get in a relationship or allow somebody close to enter my life again, maybe my focus has got to be getting a job so I'm not dependent on somebody financially. Maybe my focus needs to be growing my business so I don't have to depend on somebody else for finances or a living situation. Maybe my thing that I have to do is move out of my parents' house or move out of my aunt's house or my abusive uncle's house because I can't focus there, and it's not good for my mental health to be around other alcoholics when I'm struggling too. So maybe that's the thing I need to change. I need to find a new living arrangement where I'm not going to be tempted by these behaviors. I need to find a area that's conducive for my recovery. So if I have to go live in a sober house for a couple months to get out of this bad situation, then in the long run, that's going to be worth it. And it's going to be the next step temporarily that I need in order to get me on the path of becoming self-sufficient and a stronger person who's not going to attract these, these loosh feeders, these parasites, these energy vampires. So another thing, obviously, I always suggest is sobriety, or at least limiting what and how often, because we want to maintain a clear head and we don't want to put ourselves in a vulnerable situation where somebody could influence us because we're not paying attention. And last but not least, I also find a lot of relief in human design and astrology because it also is a tool to help me look inside of me and understand my unique blueprint, my energetic blueprint, my personal karmic lessons in this lifetime, which I can find out through my astrology chart. What cycle am I currently in? For example, it was really helpful for me during my handler situations to understand that this was an 8th house activation. 8th house is the occult, so black magic falls in there, gang stalking falls in there, paranoia, fear, obsession falls into that category. So it gave me a timeline, and it gave me an opportunity to understand the dynamic of energy that was playing out at the time, but also the lessons involved in that transit. So the lesson involved in a Scorpio transit, how it teaches us the lessons of personal power, is often through the experience of giving our personal power away to something or someone else. So once I understood why it happened when it did, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense, because after having been through that relationship and that experience of the gang stalking and all the creepy people that were in my life at that time, I realized I was giving my power away to them. I was giving them too much credit for the effect that they were having on me emotionally. And at some point I just realized, oh, the power is within me. It's not the magic or the curse that they put on me that has the power. It's me giving that curse the power. It's me believing that their black magic can affect me. So what I did when all that stuff was happening, I took my own power back. I started doing self-care rituals. I started taking salt baths. I started praying every night. I started putting protection sigils on my phone so they can't, so their black magic doesn't affect me, whatever. And because I was doing the action in the physical to protect myself, and even just saying that I'm spiritually protected and reminding myself every single day, the black magic curse went away and those people vibrated out of my life. And I overcame the lesson of the dark night of the soul that is Scorpio. So that's one of the reasons why astrology could be such a great tool. And when it comes to human design, the reason I like human design so much is because it's about the energetic body, and it's about where we're telepathic. I did a whole video on this yesterday. Are you telepathic? What they're trying to hide from you, because so many of us are telepathic, but because telepathy in movies is so extreme, we often write off our own experiences with telepathy. So if you missed that video, definitely check it out, because I believe everybody has some kind of telepathy, and I think we're experiencing it all the time without even realizing it. And I think we especially experience it in relationships with people that we're close to. So like I said, a lot of the reason why handlers and narcissists can spot you in the first place is probably also because there's some kind of telepathy going on. So if your internal state is like, I don't trust people, I'm fearful, I don't trust myself, I'm not confident in myself, I don't know what I want, I don't know who I am, I'm not strong in my boundaries, all of that stuff is also being communicated on a nonverbal level, even mentally, through mental telepathy. So human design literally shows you your body graph and all of your energy centers, like your head center, like your throat center, like your gut and your emotional solar plexus, and your spleen, which is your intuitive center, your fear center. So if any of those are what we call undefined or open in human design, that's where we experience those feelings of telepathy, and we can experience other people communicating stuff directly to us, and we receive them through those senses that I just mentioned. If we have the defined center, that means, for example, if I have a defined headspace, I can implant thoughts or communicate thoughts with my head center into somebody else's head center who has an undefined head center. So human design is such a cool tool for helping us understand the open and closed centers and where we're taking in energy, where we're depositing it and communicating it to other people. So that can help you with developing boundaries within a relationship. So knowing your own weaknesses before they know them. So another thing too, manipulative people, handlers, narcissists, etc., who know you're into astrology, for example, might be able to use that against you as well. Like, oh, they're a Cancer, so they're really emotional. So if I play on their emotions, I can play them like a fiddle. Oh, they're Capricorn, they're really ambitious. If I dangle a carrot that, you know, might lead them to that next big accomplishment that Capricorn wants so bad, maybe I can manipulate them. So somebody, you know, with knowledge of this stuff can also use it against you. And I made a whole video about that too, like astrology, know your chart before they do. So these are all things that I feel like we should know. And that's why I teach these things to other people and help you interpret your chart, because I think it's one of the best ways to feel self-empowered and to protect yourself against these types. So if you're interested in working with me and doing a personal reading, you can find all the information in my description of this video and all my videos. You can also find the tools You can also find the tools for the inventory sheet, and also my moon calendar, which is half off right now because it's halfway through the month. So you can also pick that up if you want to try to sync your own or to plug in your own birth information with that chart, and then you see where the moon is transiting your personal houses or areas of life every month. So I show you how to do that in the calendar, and it's a great tool as well. But as always, thank you for watching. Thank you for your likes, comments, supports, and subscribes. I appreciate it all. And if you have any topics for the next video, let me know. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.